Good morning, good morning, good morning. For those of you who are new to our broadcasts, this is Daring Dialogues, and I am your host, Shantae Charles. Today is Finance and Wealth Building Friday, and we are continuing our read into Powernomics, the National Plan to Empower Black America from Dr. Claude Anderson, as well as Tools of Titans from Tim Ferriss. And so we're not just looking at the historical perspective on wealth in this country, but we're also looking at present day entrepreneurs, titans, if you will, billionaires, millionaires of successful companies or successful brands, to be able to give us some insight into some practical things that we can do to better ourselves in the world of entrepreneurship. So I hope that you are ready to learn. In terms of Black economic wealth and power, Dr. Claude Anderson has started us off by talking about 3 impediments to success. And the first impediment that we've been looking at in detail through his writings is the maldistribution of wealth. And he said part of that maldistribution of wealth comes from our monopolized society. And so what we have been reading about is his detailing a brief history of monopoly building in America. And so we've been trying to understand and work through what are the monopolies that this country has established so we can better know what we're working with, and we can know how to navigate around it. A lot of times people say, well, we don't necessarily want to hear the history of money, and we don't want to hear the backdrop and that kind of thing. But it's hard to understand how to play the game if you don't know the rules, right? If you don't know the setup, if you don't know how these things came to be the way they are, so that you can work around these systems. So we started out by talking about racial monopolies, and then we moved into population monopolies, and then we moved into wealth monopolies, and now today we're going to cover media and political and judicial monopolies and end it with the implication of monopolies. Next Friday we're going to talk about the second impediment, which is in what he calls inappropriate behavior patterns of Black America. And I can't wait to dig into that because I have a lot to say about Black America and our inappropriate behavior patterns if we want to build wealth. So let's first dip into what he says here about media monopolies. Commercial media creates a virtual reality of our society. Not only are the owners of media responsible for the information that we see and hear, but they create images of blacks and define us and our sense of community. Well, right off the bat, we know that this is problematic. If you have ever been out of the country and gone to another country, you know that this is problematic, because the way that the world views us is a lot of times based on the media that is coming out of the United States and being projected onto the world stage. And oftentimes the media that other countries get concerning Black people is negative. And so if you're getting 99.9% negative portrayals of Black Americans out to other countries and 0.1% positive, then guess what? When I go out to another country as a Black American, it's going to make it harder for me to do business in other countries. And I know some people don't understand that or get that, but it does. So that is the first problem. This is troublesome for Blacks because whites hold ownership monopolies over this nation's print and electronic media. This is something else that people are not aware of. Most of media is controlled by white companies and corporations. Media ownership is a source of control over power, wealth, and information. Media power is political power. Well, how do we know that? We saw that play out in these 2016 elections. Even Mr. Trump, even he gave credit to the media for helping to give him all of this free advertisement and free press that got him elected. And now I almost feel like he's angry that the media gave him so much attention and got him elected, that now he is calling the media the enemy of the people. Where, in a sliver of a sense, he is correct. Because probably had the media not given him so much attention and not given so much credence to most of the lies that he was telling, we wouldn't have had so many people who rely on media to give them the truth. We wouldn't have had so many people that went out and voted for him. So in that framework, he is actually correct. The media put him on a platform, gave him a stage, didn't give the other candidates as much press, and so of course he looked like the candidate who seemed to be the most solid, right? Because again, they went over and over again about how much Trump was not spending campaign money on media advertisement because the media was giving him space and time. All right, so media power is political power. Whites control nearly 100% of this nation's 1,500 daily newspapers, and I'm sure there are more because this book is a little old. 11,000 radio stations, 11,800 cable systems, 1,500 television stations, and the major internet businesses. These monopolies ensure that blacks won't have an effective mass communication system of their own. It means that blacks will always have to ask permission to use white-owned mass communication vehicles to reach out to other blacks or discuss sensitive racial issues. This is problematic. We're going to talk about it later. Why? Members of the public who desire to be exposed to the perspective of blacks are deprived of that information and do not have access to that type of unfiltered, the key word there is unfiltered programming. Unfiltered programming. Now, because this book was written in the late 90s, obviously it's not taking into account YouTube or Zoom or Periscope, right? Because these are all now new tools of media. So, but again, who owns these media tools becomes the question. And the moment you say something within this media framework that the owners don't like, even if it's true, you can be banned or you can be blocked or you can be locked out of the space of communicating with people who look like yourself. Okay? So that is the issue here. White society constructs monopolies inside of monopolies. For example, Clear Channel Communications provides a good example of media ownership as an important racial monopoly that is also a major source of wealth and power. According to the company's 1999 annual report, it owned 900 radio stations, 19 television stations, and 700,000 outdoor advertising units in the United States. It has equity interest in 240 radio stations internationally. The company's gross revenue at the time was $3 billion, which was up 97%. White media protects white interests. Without wealth to own media outlets, blacks will always be in a position of complaining about the images others present of them, which is why one of the things that people have been pushing for is to establish your own media outlets, your own media networks, your own social media sites besides Facebook. Everybody knows, a lot of people at this point know, that Facebook tends to ban things that they feel is quote unquote a violation, right? But I can read out loud. I got actually banned on Facebook Live. I can no longer live stream through Facebook. And what was I doing? I was reading aloud Martin Luther King's books. That's what I was doing. All of a sudden, I can no longer live stream through Facebook. So yes, they are choosing what kind of information they want out to the public. However, I'm banned from Facebook live stream, but Facebook keeps up videos of black people being shot down in their cars. Do you see how that is? Yes, Facebook keeps up videos of black people fighting. Facebook keeps up videos of black parents beating their children. So the imagery that people are getting through the media is skewed. Okay? So that's the point that I'm making. And because they have control over the media, they can decide what kinds of regular images people are seeing about black people. Because there's nothing wrong with reading aloud Martin Luther King, but yet I'm now banned from using Facebook Live. Right? So they're now filtering what kinds of information goes out, and therefore it skews the perception that people have. Facebook allows for nudity videos to be up, pornography. I've seen all kind of stuff, racial hatred videos. And when you report these videos, Facebook will come back and say it doesn't violate the community standards. So cursing, pornography, shooting people dead videos don't violate community standards, but reading Martin Luther King's books aloud does. Think about that. And I know that from personal experience. It's not something I'm making up. So the point is that we have to begin to have more outlets to present our side of the story, right? As one person said, you know, as long as the victor is telling the story, the other side doesn't really get their side heard. The one who wins is usually the one who's telling the story. So he says here, in 1999, the NAACP led a complaint and threatened a boycott against all the networks for a television season that lacked minority characters in the program lineup. Now let's even talk about that. Some of us are simply satisfied with seeing minority characters in a television show, that we're not going further and saying, let's see some black producers. Let's see, you know, people behind the scenes running things, not just acting in shows. Because again, acting in shows, if you look at the shows that are out there, it still limits what kind of person you're going to portray. A lot of people are like, oh, we're so excited. We've got all these black lead actors in film, or we've got these black lead actors in television. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't watch it. I don't watch a lot of it because of the programming. It's still negative. So don't expect me to be happy because you have a black person leading a negative imagery in a television show. That's still not acceptable. But for some people, it is. They still don't get the point. That it's not just about putting us in place. It's about putting us in place and showing us in positive lights. Not just something that's going to satisfy us and say, oh, we put you in. We put you in. But what did you put us in doing? Did you showcase an intelligent black woman who wasn't crazy? Did you showcase an intelligent black woman who wasn't in an adulterous relationship? Did you showcase an intelligent black woman who hadn't been to prison, right? Or are those the only images or imagery you have in mind when you think about intelligent black women? Why does it have to be some psychopathic issue going on with her along with her intelligence? Why can't she just be intelligent? Why can't you display her intelligence as a virtue and not as something she's using to cope with the rest of the dysfunction in her life? So we have to look at what kinds of images are being presented. Okay? All right. Now, it's very interesting about what he's going to say next, because I actually had a dream about this. I had a dream that a group of black attorneys got together and sued the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and in my dream they won the case. It was a major like class action suit against the imagery that was being allowed to be put out about black Americans that was affecting how black Americans were being treated in society. And they actually won the case in my dream. And it was a humongous amount of monies that they won, that the FCC agreed to put in a trust fund for black America. And it was like shifting, like a ground shifting kind of settlement that allowed black Americans who had been kind of on the lower class economic rung were able to move up because of this trust fund. Now, I hope that happens. I think it would be awesome. But that was my dream. He says, in the program, the minority characters in the program lineup, the network owners did not forget that blacks existed. They chose not to include them. In matters like this, blacks negotiate from a position of weakness because they own no networks and few television stations. Kind of like what happened with Oscars So White, right? 2016, people got angry because they didn't nominate very few, or if any, black actors to the Oscars. Well, they heard the dissension. They heard blacks being angry about it. They couldn't have they looked at the numbers, probably because I think blacks spend about 42% of ticket sales come from black Americans. So if we boycott theaters and don't go see any movies, that's money lost. So this year, what did you see? Yes, you saw better movie choices, but you also saw them step up to the plate, right? And began to nominate black actors for the awards and the films. So we don't want to be the people who continue to negotiate or try to negotiate from a position of weakness. We have to get to the point to where we're owning our own stuff. Now, of course, when he wrote this, I don't believe TV One was started yet, but TV One is a good example, but it's the only example right now. TV One and the Oprah Winfrey Network. We've got a long way to go still. And if you look at the programming on the Oprah Winfrey Network, some of that I would not watch. Because again, the imagery and the stereotyping is still yet there. All right? In the case of the complaint, the NAACP would have come closer to addressing a core black problem. If it had challenged the FCC, there you go, and the executive branch of government to demand greater black ownership of television outlets. Without ownership, blacks are unable to communicate with their own people, and this is key, without passing through and having the approval of non-black media owners. And since black issues tend to make whites feel guilty or threatened, white media only gives blacks access to their media when the issues are race neutral or relevant to the major society. So if you're coming on with a lot of stuff talking about empowering black people, chances are you're going to have a hard time getting in the door to do a television show or getting in the door with a network, because they don't want to rock the boat. All right? So this is why we need our own media outlets, so we can say what we need to say, when we need to say it, how we need to say it. Okay? And the other issue is, if it's not relevant, quote unquote, to them, to the majority society, notice I didn't say the majority people in the world, but the majority society, then they still will have a problem with letting you in the door. Even when blacks own media, they have impediments to programming and economic success. The few broadcast and print properties that are black owned are so dependent upon white advertisers for revenue that programming from a black perspective is often muted to avoid disapproval as being too black. Anything that is all black is too black. There are not enough black advertisers to support black media companies, which are an afterthought with white advertisers. If they do elect to purchase advertising from black-owned media outlets, exactly, I do agree with that. It will be safe programming. So PBS, right, is safe programming. It's mainly because it's talking about history, it's kind of talking about what's already happened, but it's fairly safe programming. PBS doesn't come out and say, shame on you, white people, for letting this go on for several centuries and never doing anything about it. What are you going to do about it now? No. PBS presents the facts, lets you kind of mull through the facts and moves on, right? They avoid supporting black media when it reflects racial controversy. Again, they avoid supporting black media when it reflects racial controversy. Ava DuVernay, right? She released the 13th on Netflix. Had she tried to release it on a major television channel, do you think that they would have said, I need you to take out this, I need you to take out this, I need you to reword this, I don't want you to interview this person? There would have been lots of restrictions on what she put out. So she put it out onto an independent platform so that she could reach more people with her viewpoint. All right. No other group actually has such social prohibitions. Nearly 99% of all white Americans live in all white communities, work in all white offices, conduct business with white customers, and send their children to all white schools. White print and broadcast media outlets target nearly 100% white audiences, but they are not criticized for being too white. Even national political parties spend less with black media than they spend to reach other groups. According to this report in the Challenger magazine in the 2000 issue, the Republican National Committee at this time indicated it would spend $10 million in advertising to Hispanic media and $0 to black media. Now let's back up for a moment. I do remember Obama, during his tenure, he did put something in place concerning black communications companies. I can't remember all that it entailed, but it had something to do with allowing black people to invest in black media companies, and I think it was specifically for black Americans, and it was kind of set up so that black Americans could kind of get in first with investments. But think about this. During this time, the Republicans said black people aren't even worth advertising to. In other words, we feel that the Democrats at that time would get so much of the vote that that black people in general were such a shoe-in for the Democratic Party that they had allocated $0 with black media to advertise with black people. They basically said, you aren't even worth advertising to. But yet, when they don't have an increase in people coming over to their party, and they're surely not going to have now, lots of black Republicans are leaving the party. Now, at this point, when they don't have black Republicans coming over, then they complain. Dude, you said you were going to invest $0 into black media to advertise to black people. So that tells me you don't even think we're worth your time or your money, right? White media monopolies go unchallenged regardless of how frequently and unjustly black people are treated. The control of images we see by media and the corporations who buy advertising was demonstrated in Detroit, Michigan at the premiere showing of the Tulsa race riots. And if you're just coming in, we're reading from Powernomics and we're talking about the media monopoly. The movie produced for HBO told the story of the 1921 racial assault that claimed the lives of approximately 600 black people. Their homes and their businesses were robbed and bombed by the government and burned by whites who admitted in the program that they were jealous of black people's economic successes. So a lot of times people say, well, if black people would only, do for themselves, if they would only, pick themselves up by the bootstraps that they don't have, then they could see some progress. Well, black people were doing that. There were plenty of black-owned businesses before the 60s. Else, black people would have not had any place to eat, any place to sleep, any place to go to the movie theater, any place to catch a bus. There were black-owned companies before the 1960s. Okay? And so what happened, in many cases, like the people admitted in this film, they began to grow jealous and envious of black economic success. So on one hand, you have them saying, we don't want to help black people. Black people need to help themselves. And then on the other hand, when black people did help themselves, jealousy ensued and people said, I'm going to burn it all down. Okay? And that is what happened in the 1921 Tulsa, Oklahoma race riots that they call race riots, but it was actually genocidal destruction of a black community. 600 black people were killed. They hadn't done anything wrong except be successful. All right? So sometimes America tries to rewrite our history, but that's why I'm here. Okay? So, although this film is a poignant and important historical documentary, white businesses in the Detroit area refused to financially support its airing at the Wayne State University campus. Government resources had been used to develop and maintain majority monopolies. Government policies allow media and communication monopolies such as telephone and broadcast industries. The internet was developed largely with government funds, but it's now owned by private companies and is becoming another white-owned media monopoly. And in case you didn't know, if you do a little bit of research, Facebook, the owner of Facebook, the owners of YouTube, and the owners of Google are all friends, or they're either friends or they're related. So that's a monopoly. Okay? So even though we see those three things and we think, oh, they're independent from each other, really they're not. They're still a type of monopoly. So that was our section on media monopoly. Let's take a look at political and judicial monopolies. The nation's political and judicial systems are racial monopolies that form the superstructure of society. These monopolies make nearly every political and legal issue about race a foregone conclusion.